Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Economics of Sports. This lecture is going to be about the value of a D1 men's basketball player. All right, kind of breaking down the economics of what a player's value is. So, as we talked about, in previous classes with media rights, the NCAA has a broadcasting rights deal or media rights deal with CBS Turner. That deal is worth a lot of money, right? It was entered into in April 2010. It was originally 14 years, 10.8 billion, roughly $770 million per year. In 2016, they extended it by an additional 8 years and $8.8 billion. So the total, as we talked about in the other class, the total for 2023 that the NCAA would be getting paid from both CBS and Turner is $873 million. Right, $873 million. But that doesn't include two other amounts. So if you look at 223 on this slide, there's another escrowed amount of $25 million, and then another advance to the NCAA of $25 million. So that equals another $50 million. So in addition to the $875 million, they get an additional $50 million. Right? So that's a lot of money. So what we're going to do for today is break down with the value of a D1 athlete based on the figures from 2019. And the reason I'm doing that is because that's the last year that St. John's was in the Big East. Was in March Madness. It was in the tournament. So let's look at the 2019 numbers. In 2019, the NCAA was given $804 million from both CBS and Turner. In addition, as you can see, there was another $75 million 75 million, 77.5 million as an advance, and 67.5 million escrowed. So in 2019, the NCAA received 804 million, advanced 7.5 million, so total about $811.5 million. And again, 67.5 million is due, but won't be realized. It'll be held in escrow until 2025, a few years from now. So where does that money go? That's always a good question. Where does that money go? So what the NCAA has is they have a redistribution plan. And they have a series of funds set up where they redistribute the money back to the member institutions. So you can see here there's a number of funds. The Equal Conference Fund, Basketball Fund, Sports Sponsorship Fund. The funds have changed since 2019. There are a couple additional ones, but this is pretty much the basis of it, right? They redistribute the money back to the member institutions through these various funds. And as you can see, in 2019, the revenue that was redistributed back to the member institutions totaled about $590 million. So that begs a question. They earned $811 million, but only distributed back to the schools $560 million, right? So that's only 73% of the money goes back to the member institutions. Well, where does the other 27% go? Well, that's an interesting question. But for basketball purposes, though, and this is where it gets a little more interesting. There are only two funds within the redistribution plan that fund basketball. And those two funds are the Basketball Fund and the Equal Conference Fund. And in 2019, those two funds totaled $222 million, right? Roughly $222 million. So only 38%, or 27% of the total was distributed back to basketball funds. All right, so these two funds equal about 38%, but of the $811 million that was made, only 27% of it actually went back to basketball. Basketball earns the money, but they only get roughly a quarter of that money back. So, therefore, in 2019, the NC was paid over $811 million for the 3 weekends of broadcast of college basketball, but returned only 27% of that amount directly back to the sport through those two funds, the Basketball Fund and the Equal Conference Fund. Now, the next question is, well, how does that money get back to the schools through these two funds? Do they just get a check? Do they just distribute it back to the schools? Well, it's paid to the schools what they called earned units. All right, so when the team makes a tournament, they earn a unit. So in 2019, there were 132 units up for grabs. All right, so there's 132 units. Each unit was equal to $1.68 million. So if the team made the tournament, they got 1 unit. When they advanced, they earned more units. So each unit accumulated was valued at $1.68 million. Interestingly enough, though, you earn that unit of $1.68 million. The NCAA just doesn't give you a check for $1.68 million. They spread it out over 6 years, but we're going to get into that in a little bit. All right. So in 2019, the Big East itself, the teams that comprise the Big East, earned $6.7 million from the earned units. Not bad, right? 6.7. At the time in 2019, there were 10 schools. All right, the UConn came in afterwards, but now there's 11, but there were 10 schools. So the money, these earned units, goes to the conference. All right, it doesn't go to the schools. First off, it goes to the conference. And then the conference, the commissioner, has the full discretion of how he or she is going to distribute that money. In our case, it's Val Ackerman, she, for the Big East. So they have full discretion on how that money is going to get redistributed back to the 10 Big East colleges. All right, so that they do it equally. Each at 6.7, each school gets 10%, or do only the schools that made it to the tournament get some money, or how it gets distributed is up to the commissioner. All right, so the Big East earned 6.7 million in earned units. If they divided it equally, that means each school within the Big East got $670,000. Not bad, right? $670,000. But then you have to remember, this is paid out over 6 years. So for St. John's making the Big East tournament and playing in the Big East tournament, and for all the other schools within the Big East, they got $111,000, $112,000. So you think about it, $811 million is made. But what actually gets to the member institutions that participate, if it's divided equally, was $112,000. Okay? So you can see, depending on which conference you play in, you benefit differently, right? So over the period of 20 years, roughly 20 years, the Big Ten Conference, who does well in the tournament, reaps the rewards. The Atlantic ACC, same thing. The Big East, okay, not too bad, but like Conference USA, not as much. So in this scenario, the power conferences keep getting more and more money, right? They keep getting more and more powerful. All right, so let's think about this, if this is a fair scenario. I mean, think about it in the context of how professional sports redistribute their money. In professional sports, it's mostly shared revenue and minimum salaries, right? They share the revenue. We talked about that earlier, right? The NFL shares their TV revenue. 48.5 of that money goes back to the players. 48.5%. All right, well, then they have minimum salaries, right? So the NBA, they have basketball-related income where 51% goes back to the players, and they have their minimum salaries based on that. So why can't we do a similar thing with the NCAA? Why can't half of that money, right, roughly half, right, in the professionals, they redistribute back to the players about half of that money? So just taking the conferences and looking at this kind of breakdown here, the NCAA realized in 2019 $811 million. Let's give half of it to the student athletes, right? Half of it to the student athletes. Then what about the escrows? All right, well, let's count that in two. So if you gave half of it, that means $439 million go back to the student athletes. Well, then the next question is, how many student athletes are there that play basketball? Well, in 2019, there were 4,511. So that means, dividing that money by 4,511, that means each player would get $97,000. Each player would get $97,000. Whether they made the tournament, didn't make the tournament, whatever, they would get $97,000. All right, so that's my proposal, right? The NCAA should pay for all men's basketball scholarships, right? And they can take it out of that $97,000, right? So 411 students, the average cost of a scholarship is about $38,000 back in 2019, right? That money gets redistributed back, $439,000. Each player gets $97,000. Average cost of scholarships $38,000. Well, balance goes to the athlete, $59,000. It's not bad for playing basketball for a year at college level. $60,000 just to play basketball. That's for on-court play. That's not NIL stuff or anything else like that. That's for on-court play. So my proposal was that $59,000 be held in escrow for that student athlete until after graduation, so they can use it for graduate school. If you want to be a lawyer, doctor, whatever it is. But those funds are available for them if they need it during the course of their college years. Well, maybe there's the trustee there who can write them a check for a percentage of that money, not spend it all. But that's what we have. All right. So I want you guys to think about this. Think about the value of a D1 athlete, not just in basketball, football, women's basketball, other sports. Think about what their value is, and then we'll have a discussion on it come Friday. Okay. Thank you.